Hey you, are you lost? Are you supposed to be here? Isn't it past your bedtime? What, you want to fight about it? Tell me in the comments section below, and stick around as we cover combat in Pathfinder 1E. Are you trying to gain the upper hand in your next barroom brawl? Are you wanting to get the advantage in the next ambush you and your party are in? Then look no further as we cover the basics to combat in Pathfinder 1E. Now we will be covering the rules during basic combat. While this will be the bread and butter for our ranged and melee marshals, spellcasters will be good to stick around, as it can only improve your cohesion with your meat shields. I mean, your valued party members. Now, as I stated in my last video going over action, these will be the rules, not the exceptions. Exceptions to rules can be found in the ability or feat description that provides those exceptions. The last video covers action types that will most likely be referenced in this video in case you want to stop this one now and come back after you've brushed up on the topic of the last one. Where to begin? Let's start with what combat is. Combat is an encounter where two or more opponents attempt to kill, restrain, or incapacitate each other, or flee. Most parties only actually focus on the first one. Combat begins when one or more opponents involved begin to act in a way that impose their own force on another, or begin to perform an action that someone present would attempt to impose force on them. The rogue starting to steal something in front of a guard who will arrest him. Roll for initiative. Combat works in a big circle, called a round. Each person involved gets their own turn in that round. Their place in the cycle is determined by their initiative. All combatants at the beginning of combat roll initiative. You may have a bonus to this, then you proceed to the surprise round. Surprise is determined if opponents can see each other, if any are hiding in any way, and if the appropriate perception checks are made, if they are. If all combatants are aware of each other, then when initiative is rolled, you may skip this surprise round. Surprise round. Only those who are aware of combat starting, so those who are not surprised, act in initiative order, highest to lowest like normal. Each combatant takes a standard or a move action, as well as any free actions. After this is done, initiative starts over, and everyone acts as normal. Going down initiative is easy, but what if you want to change where you are in the initiative order? You can delay your action. Doing so, you choose delay your action, taking none of that time and deciding either now or between who else in the initiative order you want to act between. You can wait and insert yourself into an open spot or make the decision now. Your new initiative count is from that point further what you have chosen. You can obviously delay more later on if you want to just hold your action. You may also ready an action. This allows you to ready a standard action, a move action, a swift action, or a free action for later in the round of combat. You specify the action you will take and the conditions or trigger which you will take. Then, anytime before your next turn in initiative, if the trigger happens, you interrupt the other character and perform your action. The opponent continues his actions if he can, and your initiative result is now changed. For the rest of the encounter, your initiative result is the count on which you took the readied action, and now act immediately ahead of the character that caused the trigger for your readied action, if there was one. During a readied action, you can take a 5-foot step as part of the action, but only if you don't otherwise move any distance during that round. So before you stated you wanted to ready your action, or as you readied your action. If it comes back to your next turn, you have not taken your readied action, then you do not gain the action back. Moving in combat. It's important to remember that everything in Pathfinder combat happens in a 5 by 5 foot square. So making a 5-foot step moves you 1 square on the combat map, and moving your speed of 30 feet moves you 6 squares on a movement action. Also, taking diagonal movement, the first square only counts as 1 square, while the second counts as 2, with this pattern rotating. So diagonally, 3 squares is 5 feet, 15 feet, then 20 feet as you move 5 more. It is important to remember that encumbrance, so carrying too much, slows your movement in combat. Moving through difficult terrain, like steep stairs, undergrowth, loose gravel, anything that hampers your movement slows your movement by each square by 1. So it takes 2 squares of movement per each 1 square that you decide to move. Diagonally counts as 3. You can't run or charge difficult terrain. Be aware that there are things that can double difficult terrain to a cost of 4 squares of movement instead of 2, and even double that all the way up to 8. There is also minimum movement. So despite any penalties, if you still have the ability to move, even with all the increased difficult terrain to your circumstances, you may take a full round action to move 5 feet in any direction, so 1 square. This does provoke an attack of opportunity and can only be performed as a full round action unless there's an effect that states otherwise, and you cannot perform a 5-foot step due to the difficult terrain. There are other kinds of movements like squeezing and climbing and overrun and all that kind of stuff. I'm sticking to the basics for right now, and I can cover some of that when I go over different aspects of combat or things that are more advanced when it comes to movement and abilities. Before we move on, I'm going to cover attacks of opportunity. The reason I need to cover this now is because the table I will give you in the actions video and things that you do in combat will possibly cause you to have a free attack against you. And like I said, I covered this previously in my action video as well. So an attack of opportunity happens in melee combat when an opponent lets their guard down, so they've opened themselves up to the enemies around them, allowing them to take advantage of their lapse in defense, and they get a free melee attack. 2 kinds of actions can provoke attacks of opportunity: moving out of a threatened square and performing certain actions while within a threatened square. A threatened square being a square within normal melee reach of an opponent. Moving out of a threatened square provokes an attack of opportunity unless you are only taking a 5-foot step, or a withdrawal action is mentioned in movement earlier. Now, some actions provoke attacks of opportunity while in a threatened square due to the action diverting your attention from the battle. Things like attacking with ranged weapons, casting a spell, usually, drinking a potion, reading a scroll, use of spell-like abilities, loading some weapons, like certain crossbows, delivering a coup de grace, standing up prone or from the prone position, or the running action. Quick stop on reach and threatening a square. A character's reach normally is 5 feet, so 1 square. And that's any adjacent square. Large, tall, large creatures can normally reach 2 squares. This increase with size and some weapons like glaives can increase this as well. If you can hit, generally you threaten. Now, that does not include like ranged. This is only for melee. Now let's look at what you bring to the table during combat. Unless you're spending your action to cast a spell and you have an attack roll, though, sometimes casting spells require this too. An attack roll is always a miss if it's a 1 and a hit if it's a 20. Critical hits are decided by rolling an additional 20-sided dice, and after you add the same modifiers to what you had just rolled, the threatening attack that's going to hit, you then add it all back up. And if it meets or beats their AC, like a normal hit, then you have performed a critical hit. Attack bonuses are added to your attack roll. It is your base attack bonus, your strength modifier, size, any additional bonuses you have for your melee attack bonus. Your ranged attack bonus is your base attack bonus plus your dex plus your size modifier plus your range penalty, depending on how far they are from you. Range penalties are generally -2 within every additional range increment beyond the first weapon, or beyond the first. Thrown weapons have a max range increment of 5. Projectile weapons like guns, bows, have a max of 10. These modifiers and bonuses are stated as a rule, not an exception. Remember, there can always be lots of exception depending on the build or character. Next, you have your armor class or your AC. Everyone should be used to this if you're coming from another game. This is a mix of spell, magic items, armor, dex, feats, abilities, agility, modifiers. It's calculated as 10 for the base. For most everyone, it will be 10 for your characters, plus your armor bonus, your shield bonus, your dexterity modifier, and whatever else you have. Some bonuses don't stack, so do make sure that you look to see where your bonuses are coming from when you're building your character, and especially when you're buying gear and with spell buffs. Some modifiers like enhancement bonuses to armor's deflection bonuses are some bonuses. We've got natural armor, so how thick, tough your skin is, size, and dodge bonuses. Like I stated, enhancement bonuses like to your armor do not stack if you cast a spell that also increases the enhancement bonus. They just kind of fall on top of one another. So if you have a +3 suit of magic armor and you cast a spell that gives it +2, it does not increase your AC. The same thing goes for weapons. Aside your normal AC that we just covered, you also have flat-footed. This is your AC minus your dex, most dodge bonuses, and so this is usually if you are surprised or if something gives you the flat-footed effect. And then you have your touch or touch AC. This is how easy it is for someone to reach out and touch you, perform touch attacks. You're going to get a lot of this when you deal with ghosts. This does not take into account AC from your armor, your shields, or natural armor. It does include things like deflection and other bonuses. Now that we got that what's protect you, let's do hit points real quick. Hit points, or HP, is just your ticking clock. It's your full first hit dice decided by your class and either the rolled result or average for every level after, along with your Constitution modifier multiplied by your level, and any other thing when it comes to feat or abilities that you might have. 1 to your max, you work just as normal, nothing impedes you. When you reach 0, you are disabled. Disabled meaning you can only take a standard or a move action along with your swift, immediate, and free actions. Now, fun part. At -1, you're dying. And when you take negative, so when you become negative your Constitution score, not your modifier, but your actual score. So if you have a Constitution score of 12, when you are at -12, you die. Now, dying, you're unconscious, and each turn you're going to make a DC 10 plus your current negative HP number in a Constitution check to become stable. If you fail, you lose an additional HP, so it gets harder as it goes on, and you try again the next turn, well, until you die. And then, of course, a natural 20 means you instantly stabilize. A stable creature does not lose any more HP. If you're taking continuous damage, though, you will automatically fail your save for that turn. You take the damage from whatever is hurting you that's continuous, either bleed or MILF's acid arrow or whatever, and you take the 1 point of damage for the fail. Now, you can have someone perform a DC 15 heal check on you or any kind of healing magic, and it will instantly stabilize you. Additional damage, like previously mentioned, will just continue to kill you. If you've still got negative HP, 1 after you're stabilized, and you're being tended to, we'll focus on that in a second, then you make the same DC 10 Constitution check, and you become conscious. And then once every hour, if you failed that. But you're not going to lose any more HP, and a 20 means you're awake. If you still have negative HP, then you are disabled until you become positive, so 1 or higher. And if you're aided, like I said before, being tended to, then your HP recovers normally. So over time with 8 hours of sleep or a night's rest or something. So that's something different than some of your other additions like 5e. Players only heal 1 HP per character level after an 8-hour rest in Pathfinder. Now, without being tended to, so if you're all alone, they left you to die. If you fail the save an hour afterward, like mentioned, to stabilize, you lose another HP, and an hour later you can do it again. And you don't heal normally like a tended person. So if you're unconscious for 8 hours, you don't get that 1 HP per level of healing, and hopefully it brings you back. Instead, if you're alone in the middle of the woods dying, left for dead, you better hope that you stabilize and have some way of healing yourself, because otherwise you might die. So now that I've scared all the 5e players that are trying to come over, let's talk about modifiers. I'm only really going to cover a couple. You can look up charts for all the modifiers. They'll be specific for your situation and everything that you have in battle, depending on where you're having your encounter. You're looking at cover, concealment, being helpless, and flanking. Those are your main groups. Cover being behind something partially, shooting out from behind a door or a table. Concealment is either being completely behind something or invisible. Helpless is being helpless. Now, I'll cover flanking as working with a party means it's something that will come often. and always it's something that you as a party should attempt to achieve if you have marshals in your group, and you should always attempt to stay out of. Flanking, if you and an ally threatens a creature in melee combat, and you're on opposite sides, so if you and your party member are threatening an opponent and you're on opposite sides, one front, one back, even though technically Pathfinder doesn't have front and back, then you receive a +2 attack as a flanking bonus during your turn. There are other things that your character can possibly do depending on your build. There's special attacks. Some of them actually pertain to the flanking bonus we just went over, and different status effects that are on your character. I've covered charge because it was in movement, but there are other things like aid, feint, combat maneuvers. Let's see, two-weapon fighting. If I cover everything, I'll never get to sleep, and I would lose out on the ability to make content over it later on. So these are your most common. Not everyone's going to spend their time to aid or to use feint or use combat maneuvers most of the time. But depending on your build, you can get a lot of use out of it. I've even had characters that they could frighten their opponent so much that they debilitated them, got an extra attack, and lowered their AC, making all of their attacks easier. I mean, it was devastating. But there are many options that will cause conditions for your character. These are mostly exceptions, so if they are referenced, you can look them up. I will do some build videos, like for one of the monks that my wife played, and it had multiple conditions that she inflicted every single combat round. And so I'll cover conditions in a different video. But I have provided a lot of information. I'm going to try and cut in some videos of different examples. And so this is probably long overdue. My next video, I will just have a battle map up. Thanks for joining me on this adventure through the world of Pathfinder. I hope you've enjoyed our deep dives into this fantastic game. If you want more Pathfinder content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode. If you have any tips or requests, put them in the comments below and check out my other videos. Until next time, may your crits be epic, your adventures legendary, and your gaming table filled with laughter. Remember, the realm of Pathfinder, the only limit, your imagination.